Well, hello, avid readers. Trisha Goyer here, and I am so excited to have a new friend, Naomi Stephens. So, Naomi, welcome. And why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be chatting. Yes, I am Naomi Stephens. I am currently living in New York, and I've really only been here for a little over a year. I'm part of a pastor's family, and my husband received a call to serve in New York just about a little over a year ago. So that's been really exciting. We have two kiddos, and we just love the area. It's a very I get to commute to work. I use public transportation. It's a completely
Wow.
new, different experience for me. Everything within walking distance in the village. It's been really cool. So yeah, I studied. My undergrad. I studied English. I studied literature in particular. I've always had a fondness for British literature in particular. So for undergrad, I went to Concordia University in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and that's where I met
Hmm.
my husband. And then I studied for my graduate program at Indiana University in Purdue University in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and focusing especially on British literature. So that's very much the genre that that I resonate with the most. So yeah,
That's so cool
that's
because
me.
the book is The Burning of Rosemont Abbey,
Yes.
which is so cool. And the cover is gorgeous, by the way. Yeah, hold it up. Yeah, it is just looks so good. I love it. Okay, so tell us about this book because well, I started reading about it, I'm like, oh, I can't think of any other book that's similar. I mean, and that's saying a lot because I read a lot of Christian fiction, even like the time period, and maybe there is something out there. But tell us about the book, and I can't wait for you to hear you describe it.
Absolutely. So the story's heroine is her name is Louisa Everly, and she's a twin. And her brother Paul is very much a ne'er do well, kind of up to no good. Nobody in the town really likes him or has anything good to say about him. And there's this horrible incident where the abbey near Wilbeth Green is burned to the ground, and
Mm.
everybody thinks that Paul must have done it. Obviously, he did it. There's lots of reasons why they think he would have, but Louisa is absolutely assured of his innocence, and he has a very unusual alibi for her in that she experiences that strange kind of twin bond that you sometimes hear about, where she feels this moment and is like something horrible has happened. She feels the moment that he dies. And so
Mhm.
when the timeline of the crime is being sort of reconstructed, she's like, there's no way Paul did it. I know it because I know what I felt. And it's not a lot to go on when you're trying to prove someone's innocence, where everything is very much stacked up against them. And so she joins forces with some unlikely allies to clear her brother's name. So there's an inspector character who's a little bit grouchy, but they've known each other for a very long time since they were kids. And he's very much stay out of the investigation by all means, and she's absolutely not going to do that because she doesn't really trust the local police force to come to the right conclusions, even though Malcolm is very much on her side. Yeah, and she teams up with the vicar from the town and a very old church lady named Mrs. Watson, and they make a very unlikely troop going around trying to find evidence. But yeah, it was great fun to write.
I mean, I love mysteries, and some of the comments that similar to Agatha Christie type of mysteries. And I love the ensemble cast where you have these various people with different personalities and different backgrounds. And so, how did you come up with these are the characters that I want? Because there could be so many different possibilities, especially if you've studied British literature. I mean, I bet there was 100 different possibilities of characters. But how
Right.
did these characters rise to the top?
And I tried to lean into some of the fun stereotypes. So, the butler, like the valet type character. And I wanted to nod my head to some of those character types because I think they're so fun.
Yeah.
And I will say that I had the cast pinned down before I really started writing the book. In part because when this book was being presented to Bethany House, it was just a fragment. I really
Okay.
only had about 30 pages, and so when that was submitted, and then we heard back, more, send us more. I put together like who who are all the possible suspects, what are all the possible clues, and I did a very detailed outline. But yeah, and all of the characters, I think for the most part, who were on that initial list are in the book. Like I don't, except for Mrs. Watson, and she was not supposed to be a character, which is
And
really
she
fun because I
she
love
just
her.
inserted herself into the book.
She
She was just
did.
determined to be there.
She was just supposed to be a funny little passing anecdote where the vicar reaches out to Louisa and he's like, I need to meet with you about something very serious relating to this crime and your brother. And they're trying to set up a time. And she suggests, noon or whatever the time it is that I picked. And he says, like, no, 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 Mrs. Watson will be here trimming the shrubberies. Like, we can't risk her being on the property because she's an eavesdropper.
Oh,
And
that is
then
so fun.
it was just supposed to be kind of a one and done reference. And then when I started the scene where she goes there, Mrs. Watson was out there trimming away and
I love that. I love that. When I was just telling I teach a creative writing class, to high schoolers, our homeschool co-op. So I was just talking about, like, sometimes you have your plot down because I'm teaching them how to plot, but then these characters will just insert themselves, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, "No,
yes.
really." Someone will just be there, and I mentioned in one of my books, I needed an ominous moment to start the book, and I had, like, this lady's on a train. It's before the Spanish Civil War, and someone's just staring at her. And it's just to bring in the ominous moment. And then that person kept showing up. And it's so funny. But I love Mrs. Watson just kept showing up. And she was going to insert herself into this story.
She was going to be in this book.
I love that. And I think another fun thing about mysteries is, you do have to figure out, because they have to be heavily plotted. I can't imagine anyone seat of the pants writing a mystery, because you have to know who are the suspects, what are the clues, how are they going to find it, what is the red herring that's going to take them off the track and then come back around again. So talk about that plotting process. Have you always wanted to write mysteries, or was this new to you?
This is a totally new genre for me. My first book that was published was Shadow Among Sheaves, and it's a completely different genre. That was very much the more like moody, broody, Victorian period,
Hmm.
biblical retelling, and it was very much a drama. And
Mm.
this, in tone, style, genre, it was all different. And I'm not a very big outliner. I never have been. And so this was the first book where I did meticulously go through and was like, can I basically tell the story? And there were
Mhm.
a few loose ends. I waited until the end, like I'll figure it out later. But I knew most of the plot, and it did
Mhm.
it did help with momentum writing it. I was like, oh, this is
Mhm.
what it feels like writing with an outline because I've not. I'm more by the seat of my pants for sure when I'm figuring out my plot. So but yeah, it took a lot of time to get all the pieces in the right place, and it's not even just what clues you need, but they have to find them in such a specific order. And sometimes it's like,
Mhm.
well, no, because they don't have this part yet, so they can't find this yet, and that does get tricky.
Yeah, and then you have the buildup. So
Mhm.
and it has to be to the point where the reader's like, "Oh, that makes
Mhm.
sense." I mean, it has to make sense to the reader, but
Mhm.
also be where they can't figure it out, hopefully, and then a build up to the big moment in the
Right.
reveal and all that stuff. So it is pretty tricky. And I think I mean, all the genres have a general plot. Like, there's gonna be, whether it's a romance or historicals have certain types of plots, but I think the mystery, there's just like you're upping the elements of it.
Mhm.
And then I love also the unique characters, because how they act and react when you have multiple characters is the fun part too. Because someone might act one way, but another person's reaction might take them a whole different direction. So it's so fun. I love that you're doing this. Okay, so what did you think as you're going through it, and as you're working on this mystery, did you ever think, like, what did I get myself into and how is this going to work out?
Yeah, I This one, more than any of my other books that I've written, actually felt like it was at times writing itself. And I've always heard of
Mm,
that. And I mean, you certainly do sometimes get into a rhythm of things working out, but this book, I don't know, it surprised me with how much
mm,
momentum I actually naturally found. I'm
that's
writing
awesome.
my second mystery right now, and that one's a different story. That one's more halting, and I have to try to figure it out. But this one, I don't know what happened, but I lucked out.
Oh, that is awesome. Okay, so tell us about the time period, because again, I don't think this is a very common time period in historical fiction. So first talk about that, because then I want to talk about the setting a little bit too.
Yeah. Yep. So it's set in 1956, and you very much feel that this whole community is living in the aftermath of World War II. You get a
Mhm,
sense for how that all plays out. You have characters who served in the war. You have characters remembering the rationing and
mhm,
all of those different struggles. And so that was it. It required a lot of research into what life would have been like. In England in such a turbulent time where it's kind of like, whew, the worst is over, but they're still kind of reeling from what happened. And but it required a lot of research and talking to family members who lived in the 50s and being able to hear some of their experiences. And it's a very interesting time period.
yeah, and I think many books, most of the ones I've written that have World War II ends like the war's over, yay!
Mm-hmm.
But there is you're right, there's an aftermath and PTSD, which we didn't even know it was at the
Right.
time, and then families coming back together. And sometimes there's these war romances where someone got married after 2 weeks and now they're coming back. I mean, there's so many things in the rationing and jobs and women were in the workforce and now they can't be. I mean, there's so many things, and I
Mm-hmm.
love that you're doing that. I cannot wait to dig into it more. But let's talk about the location and the setting too. Tell us a little bit about this location and what you wanted to develop putting it there.
Yeah, so it's in a very small, sort of quintessential British village. Everybody knows everybody's business, and everybody's known each other for all their lives. And I just love stories and settings like that.
Hmm.
And I think that it opens the door for some of that humor and bringing in some of those fun character types that are in the literature already. Um, but yeah, I wanted everything to feel very like tight. Um, and she's living. So Louisa is a vicar's daughter, and she grew up, in the vicarage. But she has since her parents have died, and her aunt and uncle, who are very well to do, have brought her. They helped bring her up into adulthood, and she's sort of remained with them, and they have her occupied with husband hunting and finding,
I know.
the right sort to marry. Who, just as a small hint, the inspector does not fit any of their
Any
qualifications.
there's a little maybe interest there, huh?
Does not fit the qualifications. So the setting also has that kind of bringing together of two different upbringings for her. She very much remembers like the quietness of
Hmm.
living in the vicarage, and the chairs didn't match and there's scratches on the floor. And so she has all these memories. And then there's her current place at Everly Hall, where everything is very fancy and she has all these nice gowns. And that's part of the friction between her and her brother, in that they were both brought to live there with their aunt and uncle. And he very much resisted and bristled against it and felt like a traitor being there. Whereas Louisa is very much just like, they've been kind to us and they've looked
Yeah.
after us. And she fits very naturally into that world, just her personality. And she struggles with that. She struggles with that. So the setting is very much the bringing together of these two different experiences for her.
I love that. So is it a fictional village or is it a
Yes.
village? Okay.
Yep,
Just
fictional.
oh, fun. Have you been to any English little villages to
No, in college, I did a 3-week summer course in London, but
okay.
only in the city, only in the
I know.
city.
I told my husband, I'm like, "My bucket list is, like, to spend a month in an English village like
Yes.
that, where everyone, like, knows everybody," and, like, he's like, "But they'll know you're a stranger." I'm like, "I know, but I just wanna, like, hear their conversations
Yeah.
and just see, like, the daily life where
Mhm.
someone always walks the dog and someone always brings the milk cow down the road," or I don't know. Maybe it's all in my
Yeah.
mind. Maybe the English villages don't exist like that anymore, but I like to hope that they do
You like
out
to
there.
go. Maybe
Yeah.
solve a crime while you're there.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I don't know if I wanna solve a crime. Oh, okay. Let's talk about the spiritual arc.
Okay.
Okay, so I know that I love when we come to Christian fiction, we know that there is a heart behind the Christian author, and some is more out there than others, like the spiritual arc. So tell us about when you approached this. What was your desire when it came to a spiritual arc?
It's very much a story about forgiveness and reconciliation. And
Hmm.
I mean, Louisa, she loves her brother so much and she's so devastated by what's happened. And she's sort of haunted by their final conversation. The last time she ever sees him, when he's alive, they say really horrible things to each other. And at the
Mm.
end, she basically says, like, I don't care if I ever see you again. And so she struggles with that. And she struggles with worrying that, like, what if her brother died before he forgave her?
Mm.
And so there's a lot of different biblical references to stories of forgiveness. And so
Mhm.
at one point, she has a remembrance of her brother, of her father, talking about Jacob forgiving his brothers.
Mhm.
And so there's different references to stories of forgiveness. Um, and reflections on, like, the liturgy and the comfort that one can find in the liturgy and in being part of the body of Christ. I wanted to bring those elements in, um, and having a character who is raised as a vicar's daughter too. For me, it was really important to tell that part of her story. I'm a pastor's kid, and
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
and my brother's a pastor, and my husband's a pastor, so it's very much a part of my family. Is seeing those family structures within the church,
Mhm.
and church worker families, and so that's also part of her experience is thinking back to what her parents taught her, and seeing those moments where her father was there to give her counsel, and she misses that fiercely. She misses
Mhm.
having that, and I think it's why it's so important that she does sort of team up with the vicar on the case too, because she's never really had much of they've never really talked beyond just casual hello. But he's able to offer her guidance that I don't think she's really received since her parents passed away, and that's hard for her. But yeah, all those experiences and little references to parts of the liturgy or hymns that are very important to me are in there. Even the epigraph of the book is one of my favorite hymns. Is built on the rock, the church shall stand, even when steeples are
Mm.
falling. I just love that hymn. So being able to put little parts from my own experiences in the church, just little head nods to some of those, it's important to me.
Yeah, and I love that. I think every book we write, there's parts of us,
Mhm.
pieces, and that those that are closest to us can see that.
Mhm.
And the readers just walk away like, "Wow, those characters seem alive," and I love like I feel so much hope after that or whatever. But it's because that's the heart part to the author. That's like
Mhm.
our heart and our like you said, the songs that meant a lot. When we are pouring that into our books, that readers can tell, even if they don't know that's what they're reading, they can
Mhm.
tell like how connected we are to that. And I love that. I mean, you just even when you're talking about it, you just see like, oh yeah, those are those meaningful things. And I love that
Mhm.
you could put that in this mystery and like
Yeah.
who done it type of thing. Yeah. So the second book, you're working on another mystery. Is it the same place, location, characters, or is
It's
it
a
something completely different?
No, it's similar. It's in the 1950s, and it's at a manor house, so it's very similar. But yeah, I'm working on that right now, and it's fighting me a little bit right now. But we'll get back. We'll get it back.
Well, and I think part of the fighting is it's like, oh wait, I'm doing all the book release stuff for this book while I'm trying to write the other book.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So it's part of it. It does interruptions and those types of things as you're working on promotion and then writing the new books. And so everyone's like, oh, the first book, it just was so much easier. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's because you were just writing the first book.
Right.
Or I know this wasn't your first book,
Right.
but
At the time, it
most of
was the only thing I was really writing, actively
yeah.
writing.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so tell us again the title, and then where can people go to connect with you and find out more about you and your books, and then continue to follow as they wait for the next one to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is, I'll show the cover one more time because it's so
Yeah,
beautiful. The
it
Burning of
is.
Rosemont Abbey. And I love that fashion. If
It's,
you read it, you'll
I
note that
know.
Louisa is very fashion oriented. So yeah, it's the Burning of Rosemont Abbey, and you can connect with me through my website, naomistephens.com. I have a newsletter sign up there. I'm always happy to do any kind of events, whether in person or Zoom. There is not a library, a book club guide for anybody who's
Oh,
interested
yay.
in having it as the focus of one of their book clubs. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Is it
So
just your name that they look for on
yeah,
those?
Naomi Stephens author and author Naomi Stephens. So
Yeah, I know. It's always like trying to get the correct things. You have to
mhm.
often get different things. But yeah, awesome. Well, we will have all those notes in the show notes too, where they can just find you. But thank you, Naomi, for being here. It's so awesome. I'm already starting it and I can't wait to read more. So but thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.